And we are live, ladies and gentlemen. We are live. And I see I have it saying that it's the Reasonably Fine Art Talk. Well, let's get rid of that right now. There we go. Welcome everyone to well, normally it would be Benchley night, but this month it's Thurber night. It is the time for the annual reading of My Life in Hard Times by James Thurber, which was one of my favorite books of my dad reading that my dad used to read to us. I'm delighted that people are here. Now, there is no liberal snowplowing do-gooder fundraiser this week. That is because we were embarking on a $2,000 fundraiser for the Miss Bellows Falls Diner project, and we were doing it in honor of police, Bellows Falls police, who had gone to the diner over the years, and we were doing it in the name of a friend of ours who was both a policeman and a painter, and he died unexpectedly prior to his retirement. Of natural cause, unexpected but natural causes. Anyway, his family reached out to us after we made the announcement and said that rather we didn't do that. So we're not doing that. We're rejiggering this. It will now be just honoring Bellows Falls first responders. That's what it's going to say. We did raise $500 plus last week, and we have two anonymous donors, each contributing $1,500. So we're at $3,500, and that leaves $1,500 to reach for the $5,000 total. So I'm sure we'll get there, but we're relaunching it next week. So I do have a couple of wonderful liberal snowplowers stepped forward, even unasked. And so we need to thank them. The Unidentified Unglet is happy to thank those who step forward even when they do not have to, even when they are not called upon, ladies and gentlemen. A big thank you to Mr. Gary Pierce and his wonderful wife, Aileen Cortez. A thank you to Catherine Fisher. A thank you to Terry Hudson, who's now, I think, on a boat to Hawaii, if I have it correctly. And to Ms. Martha Rowley out there in Saxon's River, about to get cut off from the rest of the world for the next 6 weeks or something. Well, some road construction or something. I don't know. I don't travel out that way. I don't travel out that way myself, so I don't know. But thank you, Ms. Martha Rowley. Now I see my very, 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 very tall cousin no, he's not here. He may be here, but he's being quiet about it. But I'm sure he would have given if I had asked, and I'm sure my very, very, very tall cousin will give yet again. Now I see my brother's here. Hey, Will. Oh, Nat is here. Yes. Hi, tall cousin. Will, my brother Will went to see Andrew Yang and Emo Phillips or whoever is running in the Democratic primary in New Hampshire. I want to hear all about that, Will. The Hunter family has always loved going and seeing presidential candidates. And in fact, 4 years ago when Betty Sue was visiting, she, living in Texas, presidential candidates don't go except to huge rallies or big fundraising dinners. She could not get over the fact that you could just go across the river and, pretty much see whoever you wanted. And the first person we went to see was Pete Buttigieg. And I thought he was not going to go anywhere. And it was kind of like taking someone to an open mic. But we were very impressed with Pete Buttigieg. Anyway, We are here. It is time for some Thurber. This is the chapter called The Car We Had to Push. Many autobiographers, among them Lincoln Steffens and Gertrude Atherton, describe earthquakes that their families have been in. I am unable to do this because my family never was in an earthquake. But we went through a number of things in Columbus that were a great deal like earthquakes. I remember in particular some of the repercussions of an old Rio we had that would not go unless you pushed it for quite a ways and suddenly let the clutch out. Once we'd been able to start the car easily by cranking it, but we'd had it for so many years that finally it would not go unless you pushed it and then let the clutch out. Of course, it took more than one person to do this. It took sometimes as many as 5 or 6, depending on the grade of the roadway and conditions underfoot. The car was unusual in that the clutch and the brake were on the same pedal, making it quite easy to stall the engine after it got started, so the car would have to be pushed again. My father used to get sick to his stomach pushing the car, and very often was unable to go to work. He had never liked the machine, even when it was good, sharing my ignorance and suspicion of all automobiles of 20 years ago and longer. The boys I went to school with used to be able to identify every car as it went by. Thomas Flyer, Firestone Columbus, Stevens Duryea, Rambler, Winton, White Steamer, etc. I never could. The only car I was really interested in was the car that the Get Ready Man, as we called him, rode around town in. A big red devil with a door in the back. The Get Ready Man was a lank, unkempt elderly gentleman with wild eyes and a deep voice who used to go about shouting at people through a megaphone to prepare for the end of the world. Get ready! Get ready! He would bellow. The world is coming to an end. His startling exhortations would come up like summer thunder at the most unexpected times and in the most surprising places. I remember once during Mantell's production of King Lear at the Colonial Theater that the Get Ready Man added his bawlings to the squealings of Edgar and the rantings of the king and the mouthing of the fool rising from somewhere in the balcony to join in. The theater was in absolute darkness, and there were rumblings of thunder and flashes of lightning off stage. Neither father nor I, who were there, ever completely got over the scene, which went something like this. Edgar. Tom's a cold. Oh, dee-doo, dee-doo, dee-doo. Bless thee from whirlwinds, star blasting and taking. The foul fiend vexes. Thunder off. Lear. What? Have his daughters brought him to this pass? Get ready, man. Get ready! Get ready! Edgar. Pillicock set on Pillicock Hill. Halloo, halloo, loo, loo. Lightning flashes. Get ready, man. The world is coming to an end. Fool. This cold night will turn us all to fools and madmen. Edgar. Take heed of the foul fiend. Obey thy parents. Get ready, man. Get ready! Edgar. Tom's a cold. Get ready, man. The world is coming to an end. They found him finally and ejected him. Still shouting. The theater in our time has known few such moments. But to get back to the automobile, one of my happiest memories of it was when, in its 8th year, my brother Roy got together a great many articles from the kitchen, placed them in a square of canvas, and swung this under the car with a string attached to it, so that at a twitch, the canvas would give way and the steel and tin things would clatter to the street. This was a little scheme. This is a little scheme of Roy's to frighten Father, who had always expected the car might explode. It worked perfectly. That was 25 years ago, but it is one of the few things in my life I would like to live over again if I could. I don't suppose that I can now, though. Roy twitched that string in the middle of a lovely afternoon on Bryden Road near 18th Street. Father had closed his eyes and, with his hat off, was enjoying the cool breeze. The clatter on the asphalt was tremendously effective. Knives, forks, can openers, pie pans, pot lids, biscuit cutters, ladles, egg beaters fell beautifully together in one lingering, clamant crash. "Stop the car!" shouted Father. "I can't," Roy said. "The engine fell out." "God Almighty," said Father, who knew what that meant, or knew what it sounded as if it might mean. It ended unhappily, of course, because finally we had to drive back and pick up the stuff. And even Father knew the difference between the works of an automobile and the equipment of a pantry. My mother wouldn't have known, however, nor her mother. Let's see. My mother, for instance, thought, or rather knew, that it was dangerous to drive an automobile without gasoline. Driving an automobile without gasoline fried the valves or something. "Now, don't you dare drive all over town without gasoline," she would say to us when we started off. Gasoline, oil, and water were much the same to her, a fact that made her life both confusing and perilous. Her greatest dread, however, was the Victrola. We had a very early one back in the Come Josephine in my flying machine days. She had an idea that the Victrola might blow up. It alarmed her rather than reassured her to explain that the phonograph was run neither by gasoline nor by electricity. She could only suppose it was propelled by some newfangled and untested apparatus, which was likely to let go at any minute, making us all the victims and martyrs of the wild-eyed Edison's dangerous experiments. The telephone she was comparatively at peace with, except, of course, during storms, when, for some reason or other, she always took the receiver off the hook and let it hang. She came naturally by her confused and groundless fears, for her own mother lived the latter years of her life in the horrible suspicion that electricity was dripping invisibly all over the house. It leaked, she contended, out of empty sockets if the wall switch had been left on. She would go around screwing in bulbs, and if they lighted up, she would hastily and fearfully turn off the wall switch and go back to her Pearson's or everybody's, happy in the satisfaction that she had stopped not only a costly but a dangerous leakage. Nothing could ever clear that up for her. Our poor old Rio came to a horrible end finally. We had parked it too far from the curb on a street with a streetcar line. It was late at night and the street was dark. The first streetcar that came along could not get by. It picked up the tired old automobile as a terrier might seize a rabbit, and it drubbed it unmercifully, losing its hold now and then, but catching a new grip a second later. Tires booped and whooshed. The fenders squealed and graked. The steering wheel rose up like a specter and disappeared in the direction of Franklin Avenue with a melancholy whistling sound, bolts and gadgets flying like sparks from a Catherine wheel. It was a splendid spectacle, but of course saddening to everybody except the motorman of the streetcar, who was sore. I think some of us broke down and wept. It must have been the weeping that caused Grandfather to take on so terribly. Time was all mixed up in his mind. Automobiles and the like he never remembered having seen. He apparently gathered from the talk and the excitement and the weeping that somebody had died. Nor did he let go of this delusion. He insisted, in fact, after almost a week in which we strove mightily to divert him, that it was a sin and a shame and a disgrace on the family to put the funeral off any longer. Nobody is dead. The automobile is smashed, shouted my father, trying for the 30th time to explain the situation to the old man. Was he drunk? Demanded Grandfather sternly. Was who drunk? Asked Father. Zenas, said Grandfather. He had a name for the corpse now. It was his brother Zenas, who, as it happened, was dead, but not from driving an automobile while intoxicated. Zenas had died in 1866. A sensitive, rather poetical boy of 21 when the Civil War broke out, Zenas had gone to South America just, as he wrote back, until it blows over. Returning after the war had blown over, he caught the same disease was killing off the chestnut trees in those years, and he passed away. It was the only case in history where a tree doctor had to be called in to spray a person, and our family had felt it very keenly. Nobody else in the United States caught the blight. Some of us had looked upon Zenas's fate as a kind of poetic justice. Now that Grandfather knew, so to speak, who was dead, it became increasingly awkward to go on living in the same house with him, as if nothing had happened. He would go into towering rages in which he threatened to write to the Board of Health unless the funeral were held at once. We realized that something had to be done. Eventually, we persuaded a friend of Father's named George Martin to dress up in the manner and costume of the 1860s and pretend to be Uncle Zenas in order to set Grandfather's mind at rest. The imposter looked fine and impressive in sideburns and a high beaver hat, and not at all unlike the daguerreotypes of Zenas in our album. I shall never forget the night, just after dinner, when this Zenas walked into the living room. Grandfather was stomping up and down, tall, hawk-nosed, round-oathed. The newcomer held out both his hands. "Clem!" he cried to Grandfather. Grandfather turned slowly, looked at the intruder and snorted. "Who are you?" he demanded in his deep, resonant voice. "I'm Zenas," cried Martin. "Your brother is Zenas, fit as a fiddle and sound as a dollar." "Zenas my foot," said Grandfather. "Zenas died of the Chestnut Blight back in '66. Grandfather was given to these sudden, unexpected, and extremely lucid moments. They were generally more embarrassing than his other moments. He comprehended finally, before he went to bed that night, that the old automobile had been destroyed and that its destruction had caused all the turmoil in the house. "Oh, it flew all to pieces, Pa," my mother told him in graphically describing the accident. "I knew it would," growled grandfather. "I always told you to get a Pope Toledo." All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is it for Thurber night tonight. We'll be back next week. We'll be right here on Sunday night. Oh, with The Day the Dam Broke, one of the great moments in Columbus history. All right, we'll see you then. You take good care. You take good care. And see you next Sunday. Bye-bye.